I don't think that there is one biggest challenge. I mean, every project has challenges. Music is not something that stands on its own. Music is a total part of the game or movie or whatever. Hi, Inon Zur here. I'm a media composer, composing music for TV, film, but more than anything else, video games. Over my career, I composed over 90 video game titles and scores, and I am very happy to speak to all of you today, giving a little bit of my experience in composing music for media, but mainly for video games. Inspiration was, I don't know if to call it really inspiration. I would say it was almost an urge. Since I was really young, like in my first years, I was drawn very, very strongly to music. I could say that I remember myself, like even the age of 3, coming up with like harmony to like songs that my parents were singing to me. And I just loved music. Music just filled me up and was such a huge part of my life. My parents are great music lovers, especially classical music, but not only, they also listen to some rocks, not jazz, but, and folk singers, Israelis. Of course, I was growing up in Israel, but also like the Beatles and, and other groups. So I was exposed to a lot of music, in the first years. And at the age of 8, I started playing piano. I know that right now it's kind of late. Many kids are starting to play piano when they're like 5 or 6. But in Israel, it wasn't sort of like allowed up until the age of 8. But the first thing I remember that when I started playing piano, my teacher started to teach me music. My early influences are all classical. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms. Later on, Rachmaninoff and Stravinsky and Prokofiev, and even furthermore, George Gershwin, Leonard Bernstein, and other composers, and even like more advanced modern composers like Penderecki and Alban Berg and Schoenberg. And I've been learning everything as far as the technique from them. But I was always also drawn to sort of like mainstream music that was what was played in Israel these days. So there was the Beatles, there was, the Eagles, there was Led Zeppelin, there was, other, groups that I was listening to their songs, and of course Israeli music. So I could say that the influences were classical, but also ethnic Israelis and world music, and all matched together. I think it's interesting, but the two things that always comes to mind actually having to do with putting together harmony and melody and how they work together. The first one is just the amazing work that Bach did, especially with his fugues, that he and this is what I am at least trying to do many times when I'm composing, making and writing in a horizontal way, and the actual melodic lines are building the harmonies. Everything I'm thinking of basically in terms of movements and not as blocks of chords. So the way he constructed it, I've learned so much from it. The other thing is, it's interesting, but Richard Wagner, who known a lot for his like pompous, bombastic operas that he wrote, actually wrote the intro for his piece Tristan and Isolde. And this little, maybe 5 minutes cue of music that is just astonishing, how he basically evolving and developing the harmony that is based on like 4 notes. And I was always really captured on this way of harmonizing and reharmonizing a melody. We could hear it in many other, classical pieces, Beethoven 7th Symphony, the second movement, and other, even Ravel Bolero has this thing that the melodies keep on going, but he's changing the orchestration and the textures around it. So this always was really capturing me. I would say combination of harmony, melody, and sounds all together is what sometimes makes things fresh. For example, if I have to work and rewrite the same melody but in different cues, the way to keep it fresh will be always to look for different ways of counterpoint or different ways of of orchestration that we'll come up with. It's also about the mood and how you actually create a mood. And in many cases, it's so important to know what is the current mood we're going for. And this is what will establish the whole composition. So if I will try to target myself to a certain mood and try really to hammer it and come up with something that will support this mood, usually it'll help me to keep things fresh, because moods are so subtle and they could change and they're out there, and it's a little happier, but it's a little bitter, and it's a little sad, but sometimes excited. And when you try to find this balance and stuff in composition, usually things are coming up in different ways and many times fresh, or keeping me fresh. Duality in writing harmonic, traditional harmonic music is one of the things that I was always doing a lot. Minor and majors are always sort of like colliding in my music. Even the famous the Fallout theme that basically starts from a minor and then goes right to major, but all the Fallout music always has this bittersweet combination between minor and major, and sometimes even clashes together, which creates something a little bluesy, with this blue note that you don't know what is it. Sometimes I'll bend it, sometimes I will, so it never really tells you what is it, and it just defining. It's weird to say, but it's defining an undefined mood and atmosphere. So it's not really happy, not really sad. It has something to go along with. Also, people falling into sort of like chordal progressions that are many times define how they're going to go next. And what I always try to do is, instead of like playing chordal progression, sit on the same note and then change one note and then change another note and then add another note and then move. So basically what you get is like a melodic movement within the chords, which is altering the chords in a different way and leading it to a different setting. And this is basically always the technique that I'm doing. I don't like a fully pronounced chord unless I'm going for it. But if I'm just writing a cue, it will always sort of like be something that is like a stream, that it's going to move and it's going to create its own combination of notes that eventually will call for chords, I don't think that there is one biggest challenge. I mean, every project has challenges, and sometimes the challenges, and there are so many challenges on so many levels. When you work on a project, one challenge is actually the communication with the team, understanding what they like, understanding how they go about it, understanding how they judge a piece of music, their taste. And this is one challenge. The next challenge is actually what kind of music I will write that will complement the game and will support the game the best. And that's a different type of challenge that I will go and write some music and then we'll go and play the game at the developers' offices and we'll decide together, is that music really right, for the project? And if no, what can we change? So that has nothing to do with their taste. This is already something that has to do with the actual game. And then comes another challenge with how can I satisfy, my own taste? And how can I write something that I will be happy with and something that I will know, all right, so this is something solid. It is, it sits in a right pocket and it has enough meanings and it's meaningful enough to be released as a musical cue. All these challenges are always present when you're working on project. And I don't think that there is of course, there are always the stories, and some audio directors, most audio directors really know what they like in their own way, but they really know all the fixes. But some audio directors in my career made it really challenging because either they didn't really know what they want, or they knew it but they didn't know how to convey it, or they knew it, they knew how to convey it, but then they've changed their mind all the time. So these three things making a project way more challenging, because it's challenging enough to write the music, but if you're dealing with entity on the other side that is indecisive or changing a mind or really jumping from idea to idea or really showing total lack of understanding of what we're going, this could be and it happened a few times. Specifically for computer games, but I think for movies and TV or any media, okay? Music is not something that stands on its own. Music is a total part of the game or movie or whatever. So the music, since it's not a standalone, should be a cohesive and homogeneous part inside this whole media project. If you sort of start to notice the music too much, that means that there's something wrong. In games specifically, since music plays so much, more than what you hear the music, you need to feel the music. The music is there to enhance the emotions. The music is sort of the emotional dimension, but it's not something that should be noticeable. So the most important thing for composer to know when composing music for games is to understand that what he or she composing is only one part of the whole scheme. So trying to make something great from a musical point of view is always important. However, this is not the first thing on the list. The first thing is, what are we serving here? What are we covering here? What do we want to say with the whole thing? And the judgment, the artistic judgment, should be based on how can we serve the project better rather than how can we write the best musical piece. And this, if you understand it as a media composer, it really helps you, to deliver, things that will be effective. When you're coming to compose something, you want to know what it's essential that you will know a few things. First, the story. What is it about? The three big W's: when, where, and why. Okay? Because the why is the whole motivation, for the story. When you get that, then you know the when. Is it in the past? Is it in the present? Is it in the future? It influences the music, okay? The where, obviously. Sometimes it's imaginatory place. Sometimes it's a place that exists, but like not here in the US, in Russia, for example. It will always, influence where the actual game happens. And why probably is the most important is like, what is the story about? What is the motivation? What is all the emotional aspects that are being drawn from the story that could be enhanced by the musical score? When you get these answers, it really helps you to make the communications easy with the audio director, because, okay, so now we know where we are, we know why, and we know when, okay? So probably this is what we're going to go for. So we already have sort of like a one, common denominator, and that could connect between us, all right? The next thing will be, I'll tell the musical director or audio director, if you have something in mind, why don't you send me some examples? And sometimes they do. They send me inspirational pieces. They send me, influences that I think I should take into consideration. And I will always work from their side to me. I will rarely advise, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? I will let them do all the talking and all the requesting and all the descriptions and stuff. After that, I will take all this information and write the first piece. Based on their response, I will be able to sort of like direct them to what I want to hear. This is totally not working, for example. Okay, why is it not working? What elements? Or this is somewhat working. Okay, can you just solo and an element in this that works for you? Let's just try to solidify a element, one element that you think is really, really great and it works, and let's work out from this element. So this way, you're communicating really on a detailed base, and it really helps the whole communications. And they don't need really to know a lot of musical terms. Some of them know, which it helps, But even if they don't, again, I like this riff. I really don't like the pace of it. I think it should be faster. I think it's too aggressive. When they say these kind of things, I already know what to do because of my experience.